I'm glad I went in the service. It's been wonderful for me. I think every young fellow should go in there. I think it'll do him good. You learn responsibility, become a man very, very, very quickly. And when I came out, I went on with my life and had a wonderful life. My name is Howard Cederlin, and I'm from Wiscasset, Maine. And I served in World War II in the South Pacific. Went in 1944 and got out in 46. And fought at Okinawa and the first ship in Nagasaki after they dropped the atomic bomb. And I got into some very interesting things out there. But anyway, I went in when I was 17 years old. The Japanese were making slaves out of everybody that they conquered. They turned them into slaves. And the Germans, of course, we all know about the horrible things that they did over there. And there was a great feeling in the United States for youngsters to get in. And I think in my case, I couldn't imagine my mother or my father being captured by the Japanese or the German and be turning into slaves and have to learn how to speak Japanese or German. I just couldn't imagine that. So when I was 16, I tried to get in, and my father wouldn't sign the papers. But when I was 17, just after my 17th birthday, I did go in and joined the Navy. And I really wanted to get into it, so I volunteered for combat air crew and submarine duty. Didn't have any idea what those involved. But I ended up in the amphibious forces because I wanted to get into some action, and I guess I got enough in the amphibious forces to kind of satisfy my young ambitions. And anyway, I went to, in New York, I went to basic training boot camp, as they called it back then, and spent 30 days there and came out and supposedly a sailor. And shortly after that, they sent me to Little Creek, Virginia for amphibious training. And we learned what landing craft were and invasions and things like this, how to build railroads, all kinds of things in a very short order. And came home for a very short leave, and back I went, and I was out in Pacific, and we picked up a ship on the Pacific coast. We picked up a ship in Astoria, Oregon. It was USS Menard. It was an APA, which means Amphibious Personnel Attack. It was an attack vessel that carried 24 landing craft. And this, as you look at the pictures, is a vessel that goes into the shore, and the front door drops down, and the troops go out. And we had 24 of those. And we went through a lot of training off of California. And then on out in the Pacific Islands, we went through a lot more training. And we went to a lot of islands out there. We ferried troops around and practiced with the troops, unloading them, getting the landing craft in water. When we first started, it used to take us 2 hours to get the landing craft in the water. But our captain kept hammering in there at us to, we got to do better. And we got it down. We were 20 minutes. We could get the boats in the water in 20 minutes. And that was quite an accomplishment, because some of these boats were very, very large, weighed like 30 tons. They're very heavy. And but anyway, then we all geared up for the island of Okinawa. We didn't know we were going to Okinawa. They never told us where we were going on this ship. We had 1,500 troops on board, and in all of their gear. And to feed those troops, we had a galley that was about 60-foot beam, 60-foot wide, the ship was, and 60-foot long, this galley. And we had to feed 1,500 troops 2 meals a day, and the crew we get fed 3 meals a day. So there's, 4,500 meals fed in a 60-foot by 60-foot cafeteria during the day, and the troops would stay in line all day long around the deck just to get fed. And everybody stood up to eat. You stood up, you got your meal very quickly, and stood up and ate it and got out of there because you had so many people behind you. So that's what went on in the galley. And things are kind of crude back then. Something that some of you folks might be interested in is the bathrooms. We didn't have bathrooms like you have today. We had a couple of galvanized troughs. And each of these troughs had boards across them where a sailor would put his posterior. And you'd sit. There'd be a row of guys on each side, and you'd all sit looking at each other going to the bathroom. And of course, to flush it, there was a valve at one end, and you'd open that valve and the water would go out. But as the ship would go up and down, it really created quite an interesting thing. And every once in a while, somebody would take some toilet paper and put it on a pile in the trough, and light it on fire. And of course, as the bow would go down, that toilet paper would go sailing forward. So here were these guys like a row of puppets jumping up and down as the toilet paper went under them. So that's some of the things that went on the ship. Another thing that might be interesting for you is we crossed 180th meridian. And of course, we had all these troops on board. And they were all lined to deck. And as we were approaching this international date line, one of the officers came over the loudspeaker and said, "Everybody look in the water now so you can see the international date line when we go by it." And so they're all looking, of course, and of course there's nothing there. It's just a physical location. But after we'd gone it, and they asked everybody to see it, and of course some of the fellows swore they saw it, but of course there was no line there. But we did things like that to make life a little bit lighter as we were going on our way. Well, anyway, on the last day of March, I just hit my 18th birthday. And on the last day of May, last day of March, 31st of March, we knew we were going somewhere because all loaded with troops and vessels everywhere. And about midnight, they told us we were going to Okinawa. As we went in, we could see all of these small boats that had rockets on them. And these rocket launchers, they just tremendous firepower. It's like 4th of July, but the biggest 4th of July you can ever imagine. And then everything became quiet, and then the landing craft all got put overside, and the troops got in them, and off they went to shore. And they only had a short time to get in there because of the coral reef around Okinawa. They had one day that the tide was just right and the moon was just right so they could get in there. And that was the day we had to get 100,000 troops to shore. And they were able to do that. We ran into very little resistance at Okinawa. And it really, for the troops, it really didn't start until about the 6th of April. And then it really started because the Japanese had gone to the southern part of the island where they'd gone into caves and things like that. It ended up being the largest battle in the Pacific War. 250,000 Japanese were killed. I've forgotten the numbers of American sailors, 5,000 American sailors, and I think 7,000 soldiers and Marines. But it was the bloodiest battle in the Pacific, and many, many ships were sunk. Just on one day alone, on the 6th of April, we had 350 kamikazes come at our ships. And this is, I've described this as being like in an Omni theater where everything is going on all around you. But I think the thing that surprised me most was all the junk that went in the water, as all the ammunition, shells and planes and pieces of planes and ships blowing up went into the water. All this splashing from the water. That really surprised me. But on the 6th of April, we had a suicide plane come at us over the island of Okinawa. The hospital ship Comfort was in front of us, and we weren't sure who he was heading for, but pretty soon it became very apparent where he was heading. And he went right over our bow. We shot at him and shot at him, as did every other ship. And he went over our head, over my head, probably 20 feet over my head into the water and splashed into the water, and right amongst our landing craft out there. And we got hit quite a bit by our own fire. And a very good friend of mine who I work for, Gene White, he got hit over his left eye with shrapnel. And it's kind of a long story. I won't go into it, but to make a long story very short, Gene died on Guam. And when I retired, I wondered if I could ever find his wife, because she had made cookies for us out in the Pacific. And she used to send us cookies. And I thought, wouldn't it be neat if I could ever thank Ruth White for those cookies? Anyway, Okinawa, we were there for, I don't know, 9 days or some such thing. And another one story that we've told you before, but the 2nd of April, it was 1 minute past midnight, and a suicide plane came at us. We didn't even know they flew at night. And he came at us, and he missed us. We shot him about 6 times, but he hit the USS Ackiner, AKA 53, which was astern of us, and traveling in close convoy. Well, anyway, about 5-6 years ago, I met a fellow from Round Pond here in Maine, George Hanna, and to come to find out, George was aboard that vessel, and we had thought the thing sunk. We didn't know what happened to it because we got away from it after it got hit, but there were 5 fellows killed and 45 wounded. And but I have a picture of the Ackiner, a wheel. The suicide plane hit the Ackiner, hit one of the landing craft on it, went up and over the side, and exploded down. The bomb exploded down on the side of the vessel. But anyway, it's very interesting meeting George Ackiner after all these years. Another thing that was kind of interesting for me was, the controversy over dropping the atomic bomb, and we knew nothing about an atomic bomb, never heard of it or any such thing. And But shortly after Okinawa, the atomic bomb was dropped, and so we were going to invade or go into Japan. So we went into Nagasaki. We were the first ship in Nagasaki after they had dropped the atomic bomb. And I won't tell you about all of the bloated bodies in the water and things like that, but it was just a mess there. But we went right up to the bomb site, to the Dejima Wharf, and tied up there, and the place was decimated. There was Japanese women working there with donkeys, with white sheets over the donkeys and bags that they were filling with rice. Now, I'm sure that rice was all full of radioactivity, but nobody even knew what the word was back then. We never heard the word radioactive. I never did. And a great many of us have had some physical problems. I've lost part of my thyroid and part of my voice box, and but we knew nothing about it. But it was good that they dropped it, because it ended this thing. We were going to be the initial invasion force in Japan if the bomb hadn't been dropped, and go right back where we were. And as we went into Nagasaki Harbor, I never saw such big cannons on the mountains as we went in there, and each one of them had a Japanese sentry with a rifle, and the rifle had a white flag on it. Yeah, so that's kind of, in a real nutshell, where I was and what I did, and I could tell you a lot of stories about things that happened in between. But
to start off with, I was just a kid, 18 years old. I turned 18 on the 19th of July and joined the Army on the 3rd of August. I lived out in Missouri at the time. I joined the Army in Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. And the Army, in their wisdom, sent me to California and taught me how to fight the Japanese. And then they put me on a boat and sent me to Africa. But that's the way the Army worked in those days. The boat that I went to Africa on, believe it or not, is now a memorial. It's out in Indiana. It's the LST out there that LST number 325 is the boat that I went overseas on. And it's so small that it only took 75 soldiers. 125 sailors and 75 soldiers on the boat. And it built something like a spoon. It had no keel, because it was made as a landing craft. That's what the LST stood for, a landing craft tank, and a landing ship tank, actually. And they took us down. They'd sent us to Fort Dix. I trained in the infantry, and they transferred me to the military police, and sent me to Fort Tustin, Michigan, in the winter of 1942, the coldest I've ever been in my life, much colder than Maine. But the ship that was sunk with all the soldiers on it, a few of them from Maine, I can't remember the name of that anymore though, but Dorchester, when the Dorchester was sunk, at that very same time they sent us to New York, to Fort Dix, just to a staging area to be loaded on the ships. And the ship that got sunk, 500 or 600 soldiers died on it. They didn't tell us anything about it. It was kept very, very quiet, because they were afraid that it might panic all of us, because it was a pretty big unit of men going, and they put us all on those little small boats all of a sudden just to get us over there, and they sent us to Africa. We spent about almost a month at sea. The ship's only traveled about 10 knots an hour, and it sailed on top of the water. I mean, we were bouncing around all the time, and then the head of the convoy, the Navy captain that was in charge of the whole convoy, happened to be on the same ship that I was on. And I can't remember his name, but he was a full-boat captain on the LST 325. And we went from New York, we boarded it at night, in pitch dark at night. And when we woke up in the morning, we were well out to sea. And never saw land again until they stopped at Bermuda to pick up something. But we stayed in Bermuda for about 5 or 6 hours, and then the convoy got to move again, and we spent our time getting to Africa. At one time on the way, the ship broke down and we were left alone. All the other ships had left us, and there we were all by ourselves, bouncing around on the water until a repair ship came and repaired whatever was wrong with the engine on it, and it got it started again, and they towed us to catch up with the convoy. And that was quite a ride. The ship there was no entertainment on it at all, no exercise area, because it was loaded down with gear for apparently for the invasion of Italy. It was loaded completely down. The top deck was covered with small boats and landing rescue craft and things like that. And the hold of it was full of big trucks, and all of those trucks were full of gear. So we had no place. All we could do was sit around, play cards, and there was no activity at all for a month. So it was quite a thing. And we landed in Oran, which, if anybody ever asked you what Oran is, it stands for the smelliest place in the world. It is the most stinking place I've ever been in my life, because it has open sewers, and it is just vile. And they sent it, we unloaded there, and then they put us on trains and took us back, and I was stationed in Casablanca. And Casablanca is where I and the Army parted friendship, because I was on duty. I was a military policeman. I was on duty. When the duty was over, I went back to the building we were staying in, and there was 5 or 6 guys in there playing with guns, playing with 45s, and one of them went off and shot me right in the stomach as I walked through the door. And I spent all of May, all of June, all of July, and 17 days of August in a little hospital called the 69th Station Hospital, which was very, very similar to MASH, if you want to know what a station hospital was, except that it was put up in a school building. And I was operated on 3 times for the gunshot wound, and it was not fun at all. Then I thought they were going to send me back to the States, but they didn't. My company commander, who I did not get along with after that point, had sent my money home to my father for all that time. We hadn't been paid for 2 months, and then another 4 months, and he sent all that money to my father, and I didn't get along with my father. So my company commander and I did not get along. Captain Anselmo and I saw things in a different light after that. And I stayed in that outfit, in that military police outfit, and we rode trains to protect the shipments on the train. We were just guarding the equipment and supplies and things. And then we got to Italy. They shipped us over to Italy, and the ship we were on was the Canadian, it was an Australian ship. The name of it was the Largs Bay, L-A-R-G-S, Largs Bay. And it hit a mine in the Bay of Naples as it was coming in. And at night, pitch dark. And a lot of my buddies got killed in that. I lost 17 friends in one night. And I got kicked around a lot, but for what reason, I have no idea. Chaplain tried to tell me one time I had something to do, and I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. But I woke up in the hospital after the explosion. I can remember climbing up the ladder to get out of the hole that we were in. And I don't remember anything after that until I woke up in the hospital. And at least a day or so later, with the most violent headache you can imagine because of the explosion and all, and the inhaling the residue from the explosion. And that's when I found out that most of my buddies, and these were close friends, these were the ones I worked with all the time. You figure out of 75 men, when you lose 17 of them, we're all first name buddies. Then we rode trains there for a while, doing the same thing. And then when I got ready for the push to Rome, because I had infantry training, they took me back out and put me back in the infantry. And that was pretty good. I mean, I didn't take part in any great battles and never became a hero or anything like that. But I'm a very interesting to me person. I love history, and I've always loved history. And when we got to Italy, I decided that I was going into the Colosseum when we got to Rome. And the Colosseum was off limits. We weren't supposed to go in there. But that didn't matter. Me and another buddy went and spent the night in the Colosseum. I slept in the same places that we think the gladiators used to think, way down underground in the Colosseum. And it was a fun thing to do because I was 19 years old by this time. And we came home. I stayed in the Army for a year after that. But all in all, World War II was a real interesting experience. It was an education you could never buy. But it was the last time in my mindset, it's the last time that the whole country got involved in a war. When I would read that what they were doing in the States, I mean, it gave me a great patriotic feeling to know that little kids who were in this country were going around picking up tin cans because they were, recycling all kinds of things. And the people here their food was rationed. I missed all of that. Before I went overseas, nothing was rationed. But everything was rationed. The stories we got about what was going on here was just amazing. I mean, to think that everybody was taking part in it. We went through this little village on going there, and I was never what you want to call a real studious soldier. When we went through, I was interested more in what was going on in the town. And we went to where they put us in, we were out in pup tents. Now this is at Christmas time in 1943. A miserable, rainy day. It was horrible. And when it got at night, when it was my turn for guard duty, we're out marching the perimeter of the area we were in. And I found a ditch. I saw the ditch and I said, this is a way out of here. And I went back to the tent when my 2 hours was up. I went back to the tent I was staying in. And the guy I was staying with was a Polish fella from Cleveland, incidentally. His name was Lesniewski. Now, Les and I had a lot of fun together over the time, and I said to him, I think I can get out of here. I'm going into that little village and get some wine. And he said that he'd go with me. I said, fine. He said, well, I'm going to tell Husky and a couple of other guys. No, you're not, because that's a good way to get caught. Too many guys get involved in this and we're going to get caught. So we put on our raincoats, and it was dark. We walked out and got to that ditch. We got down in the ditch, and we literally crawled a distance of, I'd say, from here well across the road over there. We crawled in that ditch, got out of it, and walked to that little village maybe a mile away, and had a heck of a good time. I mean, the French people there were just as nice as could be. They had plenty of wine. They fed us. They made omelets for us. It was just, we had a heck of a good time. And it's time to go back because we don't want to get caught. We probably spent 5-6 hours there. So we go back. But when we go back, every one of these Frenchmen wanted to give us some wine. And we took a lot of it. We drank some of it on the way back. So when we get back to the area, the guys knew we were gone. They wanted to know where we were and all that stuff, and we told them. And they were all happy. But now I had one bottle of wine left, and Les had one bottle of wine left. And they were all going to share that wine. And I said, no, you're not mine. You didn't go with us, you don't get none. And one bottle of wine and 9, 10 guys, you know, it ain't going to go very far. And then when we got on the next day, they put us all together and loaded us into trucks and took us back into the port and put us on this Australian ship. Now, I don't know what the ship was doing there. It brought some kind of supplies to Africa and possibly troops, I don't know. But they were going to go to Italy, and we were told they were going to go there to pick up junk, you know, cannon shells and things like that, that it had to go back to be recycled. And there was no cots or anything on this ship. We just went down into the hold. When you go down into the hold on one of those ships, you go down on a ladder. And in the middle of this hold, and the hold is as big as this whole building, that one hole, and the hatch is right in the middle, and it's covered with boards. You know, they fit right in. And it didn't take me, I was in what was called the Army of the United States. There's two kinds of soldiers in World War II. There was AUS and SS. SS was Selective Service, AUS was regular Army, Army of the United States, or state units, National Guard. I was AUS. Now AUS, these regular armies and AUS, they always did everything first. We got paid first. When the roll call, all our names were called first before they called any of the SS. So when it got into the area, I was the first one called. My name being Collins. The next one after me was Kalura. And when they called Collins, I answered, and I went down the ladder, and I found that hatch. I figured, well, that's better to sleep on than steal. So I put my bags and everything on I had a shotgun at that time, my shotgun and everything, I put it on that hatch. Kalura come down. Kalura was one of the guys who wanted to share wine, and we didn't share any. He come down, he picked my stuff up and threw it off, and wouldn't let me back on again. And when they come down, all these other guys that I was close friends with ended up on that hatch. Then I was kicked off to the side. Lesniewski was kicked off to the side. They wouldn't let us on that hatch at all. When that mine hit, that hatch went right up through the top of the ship. And they went up with it. There's 17 of them. So, it ain't a funny story, but I always say I survived the war because of a bottle of wine. If I'd have shared that wine, I'd have been on that hatch. Things like that happen.
Well, my name is Douglas Wallace. I was inducted in the service from Friendship, Maine, is where I grew up. And they took us over to Rockland and gave us an examination. And I was inducted the 3rd day of March, 1943. And I went to Fort Devens, and then from there I went to Miami Beach, Florida, for my basic training. Yeah. And oh gracious, well, I went down there too long, maybe 6 weeks, basic training. And they sent me to Chinook Field in Illinois to truck driver's school. And that's what I turned out to be, a truck driver. Yeah. And then I wasn't assigned to any outfit at that time, and they sent me up to Ogden, Utah, for killing time until I got situated in Rapids. And they sent me to Rapid City, South Dakota, in a trucking outfit. And we drove trucks around there until, oh, I don't know how long, I can't remember, but we left Rapid City, South Dakota for Louisiana to be shipped overseas. The shores are, we couldn't ship anything much from the East Coast and West Coast in this country. So they shipped us down there and put us through the Panama Canal and shipped us to Australia. We made it. And one thing might be kind of interesting in that when we crossed the
equator?
The equator, and then what's the other we crossed?
The international date.
The international date line. That was interesting. I can't tell you exactly what happened, but I think it was on a Tuesday, and we set our clocks ahead 6 hours and called it Wednesday. Or it was the other way around, I can't tell you for sure, but that was the international date line. We went to Australia, landed up on the northern end of Australia.
And what outfit did you serve with?
I was 7th, the 7th Aviation. We was attached to the Air Force, 5th Air Force.
5th Air Force.
Yeah. And we turned out to be a trucking company.
2078.
2078's trucking company, yeah. We went ashore in Panama for a few weeks because the ship needed work done on it. And then we went ashore in Australia because the ship needed work done on it. And then we picked up some Australians and went up to New Guinea and worked on some old junk trucks, getting them up, kind of giving us experience of working on a truck and what have you. Then we went from New Guinea, just being transported on the island of Biak. And what was fascinating, we didn't do anything really on the island of Biak. We were just killing time, more or less. But there was a lot of shells on the reef there that we used to pick up these cat-eye shells. We used to pick there. Then from there we went into the Philippines. Went into Leyte. It had all been established back there then, but we done a lot of trucking there. The island of Leyte is quite a big island. From the east coast to the west coast, it's quite a big island. And
You were transporting, what was the majority of what you were transporting?
The Army boys that done work, and bombs for the airplanes, and a lot of artillery shells for the artillery guys there in the Philippines. There must always, the colored people had the ducks that unloaded the ships in the harbor, and they'd bring the stuff ashore. Then we would take it and haul it over the islands wherever we wanted to go. Food, clothes, bombs, ammunition, I hauled everything that come ashore.
Wounded.
Huh?
Wounded.
Yeah, the wounded.
You took.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. I'd take ammunition and stuff to the front and haul the wounded people back.
Wow.
Yeah. That was all in the Philippines that I'd done that. On the island of Leyte. And then, I don't know how long we was on the island of Leyte. We was there quite a while. Because, well, it wasn't there so long, the first of it, but we got shipped Christmas Day in 1944. We loaded on LSTs and was going to the island of Mindoro. Mindoro's name, yeah. And we got sunk on that ship. We loaded up Christmas Day in 1944, and the 28th they hit us bad. There was, the morning of the 28th, there was 16 Japanese airplanes that come over us. And they split there was 16 of them, I think. 8 come in from the east and 8 come in from the west. And they slaughtered us. They gave us a hard time. They didn't hit us, but they hit there was 2 airplanes coming down right at us. And we always thought that the other was going to take us, so they crossed over and took the gasoline, the freighter, the gas tanker on that side, and the ship loaded its ammunition on the other side. So when the ammunition ship blew up and the tanker blew up, that shook us up pretty bad. A lot of the Navy boys that was on deck and the gunners, you know, they got hit pretty bad. We was below deck at that time because when you get in air raid, you're supposed to go below deck. If you get a submarine attack or something like that, you go above deck. So that was the worst part of it for us. We got picked up.
Torpedoed.
Well, that was in the morning when they caused all that stuff, and it was about 7 o'clock at night when they hit us. Not the LST that we was on. They knocked the engine room. They knocked us out of commission, so we had to abandon ship. So we jumped overboard and got onto a raft, drifted around there, and we got picked up quite with a destroyer escort. They was there on purpose. They had a lot of empty bunks in there that they picked us up. And
With a strafing when you were on the raft.
well, when I was on the raft that I was on, they blew most of the rafts off in the morning when them ships blew up. We only had a few rafts left. There was 44 of us on the raft that I was on. And I was on the left-hand corner of it, you know, and it was about 7 o'clock at night, and there was a jet coming down with his airplane strafing us. Well, he came quite close to me, but not close enough. But the bullets was a hissing and a splashing when they went by me, but they didn't hit. That's the closest I ever come in the war of getting hit.
I was a Staff Sergeant George Allen Jones, and I was living in Maine at the time, and I was at the University of Maine. And I signed up for the enlisted reserves, excuse me, basically so that I probably could finish my college degree. But it didn't so happen that way. At the end of my first half of my sophomore year, I decided that I wasn't doing too hot, so I let them call me. And out of the reserves and into active duty. And at the time, I had signed up for pilot training. But they had changed the I qualification between the time I signed up and the date that I was going in. So I wasn't qualified. They put it down. So consequently, I stayed about a month in Columbia, South Carolina, interviewing officers or something coming back from overseas before they shifted me back into my cycle with the crews. And I went off to Columbia, South Carolina for crew training. I'd already had basic training Shepherd Field in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, radio training. I was second in my class. And then I had gunnery training in Yuma, Arizona. And then after they decided that I no longer could wait and go to cadets, they shifted me back into crew training and finished the crew training. It was about a 5-week. I could use that, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, that little froggy sits there. And so I had Columbia, South Carolina crew training. Then from when we finished our crew training, we went to pick up our ship. We went to Savannah, picked up a brand new B-25, flew it out to field in Sacramento, California, where it was retrofitted to be able to fly between San Francisco and Hawaii. The B-25 was not done, was not planned for that. That was beyond the range. So what they did, they put, Bombay was a complete gas tank. From the radio operator back to the tail was another gas tank. So it was just a flying gas tank going along. And also, 2 of the crew had to go by commercial flights because they were too much weight there. So I was the only enlisted man. The radio operator was the only enlisted man that made the flight from I can't think of the name of the field in California, but we landed at John Rogers Field in Hawaii, a 13-and-a-half-hour trip, which a regular standard maximum trip on the V-25 is about 9.5 hours. So all the rest of the gas tanks were what got us there. And I understand from records that they never lost a plane. Everyone got there because it was tight flying. And then our other 2 crew members we picked up in Honolulu and flew the rest of the way over. We went to Christmas, Canton, Nandi in the Fijis, Tortuga, New Caledonia, and finally to Townsville, Australia, where we left our new plane and took another plane that had just been retrofitted with guns, because we didn't have guns going all the way over either. There was no need of it.
Now, what kind of plane was this again?
B-25s, Mitchell bomber. B-25, I think they were, at that time, we were up to B-25Js. And they had the 12 forward-firing 50s in the nose. And then that was at Port Moresby. And then we went up to NADZAB, which is a center for new crews coming over to be transferred to the various depots and the outfits that they were going to fly with. And that's where we had a practice mission. We hit WEWAC for a practice mission. And there was a bypassed area that the Japs were there, but we weren't bothering with them anymore because we bypassed them. And then we were sent up to our regular squadron that we'd been assigned to, and I was assigned to the 70th Bomb Squadron of the 42nd Bomb Group.
Could you describe what just that training mission would have been like? What exactly is it that you did?
That training mission was just like a regular flight to go, and there's still plenty of things for us to shoot at, but nobody shot back at us, basically. There wasn't much left for them to shoot with. And while we were at NADZAB, by the way, we got jungle training. The Australians showed us how to make a lean-to and how to survive in the jungle if we get shot down. And then...
What date you got to NADZAB?
Pardon?
What date? Date.
Oh, the date. The date when I went overseas. Good point. Let's see. That had to be June 44. Yeah, June 1944. And then we went up to our squadron. We were assigned our squadron, and we went up to the 42nd Bomb Group in early October, 44. We had just about a month training there at NADZAB, which was the reception center. And then I went into the 42nd Bomb Group, the 70th Bomb Squadron, 13th Air Force. And that was area from which both the 13th and the 5th Air Force was assigned. That was the reception center over in central New Guinea. And I flew my first mission probably either about the 30th of September or the 1st or 2nd of October 1944. And funny thing about over there, we'd always expected to fly as a crew. Just you read all of a sudden about crews being together all the time. But we had a very unusual outfit. And we didn't fly as crews. We were assigned every time for any crew that happened to be ready. And I flew my 55 missions with between 30 and 33 different pilots. They all flew good because I'm back here. So it didn't make any
All different
difference.
planes?
Yeah, different planes. It didn't say in the same plane. We didn't have. You read in the stories about that. You always see the crew together always. But and this was very unusual, I think.
Yeah.
I've got a full list in there of the pilots that I flew missions with.
So this was particularly your squadron did this? It
Yeah,
wasn't
just
the
my
norm?
squadron. No other one that I knew of ever did it that way.
Wow.
Very unusual. You didn't get so palsy-walsy or so close like you would have been. So I don't know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. I flew probably between the time I got there in October and the end of the year, I'd flown my first 10 or 12 missions. And then during January, I picked up probably another 12 or 15. And then I qualified for rest leave. That was the good thing. Sydney, Australia was a very, very nice place to go. And we were supposed to have 10-day rest leaves. But they didn't have any transportation back. So I had a 30-day rest leave in Sydney, Australia, which was right on Bondi Beach, which was really a treat, a wonderful treat. And I got back to the outfit. I left it in November, last of November, and I got back to last of January. And I got back to it just about the end of February. I spent almost the whole month of February on Bondi Beach. And at that time, I was about halfway through my missions, and we were attacking Zamboanga and Luzon, not Luzon, Mindanao, that's on what island now? I forget. It's the lower Big Island, that's where they were fighting. And I flew the last of my 55 missions, which is the number that I flew. When they fly so many missions, why they send you home. So that was about the first of April, I guess. No, 1st of May that I flew my last mission.
Of which year?
1945. Let's see, that was in February. I flew my 55 missions from September 44 to through April 45. And I was 55 missions, it's a short length of time. And I had flown that with, I believe it was either 28 or 30 different pilots. And they all were good pilots. Thankfully, I'm here.
It almost sounds like that squadron was one of those squadrons that didn't do the big planning before.
Yeah.
That they were, okay, we've got something that needs to get done.
Yeah, could be.
Send it out, get it done.
Yeah.
Seems like it was
Yeah.
very, very quick paced.
It's possible, but I mean, even within our division, within our group, bomb group, other squadrons flew as crews, and I don't know why. The note of interest was that the squadron commander who left just as I got there was the great football player for Army, Light Horse Harry Wilson. He was the commander of that outfit, and he left. I think it was just about a week after I got there is when he left in the United States. He'd finished his tour of duty. He was the squadron commander at that time, and I forget the name of the new guy come in. What he was. So let's see. I had my rest leave, and I finished my missions, right? And on Palawan, where we were stationed then, we were right on a beautiful beach in a coconut grove that was for, I think, one of the American companies that grew coconuts over there. And it was the most beautiful beach, very much like Clapham, but you could go out even further. And I spent the next 3 months just sitting on the beach until I got sent home. And I left for home, caught a boat home with a ship. And a very unusual thing, when I got to to Manila, where we were going to pick up the boat, whom should be in my tent but a boy from my hometown. Yeah, and whose brother I had already met once while I was overseas, by the way. And we came all the way back to Damariscotta together from that boat. And as I say, his brother I had met in Biak. We were down there after something one day to pick up some materials to bring back to Sansapor when we were still at Sansapor. And so we got to know each other again. He was a year older. He flew Dumbos, by the way. He didn't fly. He was a radio operator on Dumbos, the rescue planes. And boy, those were some good. We have a plane drop in. Those Dumbos would be there right as quick as you could get there. Because there was a lot of planes lost, but a lot of crews saved.
My name is Leroy Elmo Peasley, and I was born here in Rockland, February 16, 1924. But because of the Depression and people without jobs, etc., I was at 8 years old. I was put into the children's home in Bath, which was the State Military Naval Children's Home. So I really got my training for 10 years before I went into the Marine Corps in 1943. I had my training there at the children's home because, and it certainly helped because when I was in boot camp, I could help the other young Marines who the mothers did everything at home. So, and now I'm here to tell my side of the story, right?
Right. Were you drafted or did you join?
No, I volunteered because my older brother Nate, he joined the Marine Corps before we went to war against the Japanese, before we declared a war. He was in the Marine Corps, Air Corps. He was a mechanic on the B-25s, the bombers. And so he was my older brother, and I looked up to him. Most naturally, I'm going to follow what my brother did, because he was my idol, and I thought the Marine Corps was the best anyway.
Okay. And where did you attend recruit training? Boot camp?
A boot camp was at I joined up here at Augusta, and we shoved off with a troop train just before January 1943. It was January the 6th, and we had a troop train from Augusta. It went through down to Paris Island, and at Paris Island it was where we had our boot camp training. And of course, when we got there, all the other Marines would holler, you know, you'll be sorry. Because I didn't know what they meant, but it did bother me, any, but some of it did. Yeah.
So when you graduated from boot camp, did you go to any advanced training or?
No, I went up to 8th and I Street. That's the Commandant's headquarters, you know, Commandant of the Marine Corps. And I had a choice of what I wanted to do in the Marine Corps. Well, I put in for Counsel's Raiders because I was in damn good shape. And I also for the Marine Corps paratroopers. Well, what happened was that they disbanded all of it, and they put those men in the, because we had, at the end of the war, we had 6 Marine divisions, and that's what we had, you know. But they were, a lot of them were special outfits that were in these divisions, you know.
So when you went overseas, where did you go?
Yeah, well, I mean, could I back off on that? Because I went to, they asked me, you know, what I wanted to do, and I told them, and then they put me up at Camp Shangri-La, President Roosevelt's retreat in Fairmont, Maryland, and I was there for a year. I was there also one night I was on patrol up near the President's Lodge, and what happened was I had my 45 on my and I saw 2 men coming down the pass, and I didn't know who they were, so I got behind a tree and I jumped out and I said, "Halt! Who goes there?" You know, advance and be recognized. Well, come to find out, when I drew my 45, they got a little nervous. But come to find out, they had come from Scotland Yard, and they were there because Winston Churchill was there with the president. I didn't know it, but everything was all right. Yeah, and I also had one of the greatest Marines I ever met at Shangri-La, and he was the type of man that when he talked and was very soft, you listened, especially us PFCs and privates. I was only a private at that time, and but he stayed with us until the fall. Then he went into the 2nd Marine Division, and he joined the invasion of Chihuahua, and he was killed there. But he was the greatest Marine I ever met.
Where was your next station? After the year there, where did you go?
I was shipped out. We went to Norfolk, Virginia, and there in one of the troop ship, and we had 2 DEs because the German submarines were out there, and we went down through the Caribbean and went to the Panama Canal. That was quite a thing. We landed at Hawaii, and we were a staging area, and for 2 weeks, you know. And then I joined on another ship, and it took us to the Kwajalein, then to Guam. I joined the 3rd Marine Division to mop up the Japanese who were still running around there in the jungles. In fact, I was on a particular, I'd say about a company up in the northern part of Guam, and we went on patrols every day. And we had one patrol was, I was the, about 8 men on the patrol, and we never took any radios with us. We had hand grenades and automatic weapons, and on one of them, I was the rear guard, and we stopped in the jungle, and we scooped down, and then I looked up, and there was a man with glasses on, no shirt on, going like this. Well, that surprised me, you know, because I hadn't had that much experience. So what I did, I turned to the corporal. I said, who the hell is that guy out there, you know? And he opens up with with his BAI, you know. And after we got back, the sergeant took me aside and he says, Peasley, I'm going to tell you once, you shoot them first and then you ask if they're friendly. And that's what I did. Because on all these patrols, it was something, there were bodies all over on the pathways, because we couldn't bury them because of the coral. So we left them there, and it was something. It wasn't exactly easy to take to see dead bodies around, but I always felt that for my own sanity, I said, well, they would have killed me if I didn't kill them. Also, they're the ones who invaded our country. We didn't do it to them. So that sort of helped me out, you know, to get. So I would say it was justified that I shot them, you know. And then after that, we got there. We trained to go to Iwo Jima, and I was on board ship Callaway on the 10th of 1945, and I turned 21 years old on board ship. We were used for floating reserve at that time, but we came in because the beaches of Iwo Jima were loaded with wounded. So we came in with the ship, and we had a cruiser on the side, and it was throwing rockets right into Mount Suribachi, you know, to keep them heads down, because we only had a short time to get there, because they would have blown us out of the water. We took on the wounded, and I'll never forget it, because putting the wounded down in the hole, that one Marine said, don't drop me, will you, buddy? And I said, you're damn tootin' I won't. And I remember up on top, because of all the Marines and all the blood and some dying, you know, that one Navy man was standing there and he was crying, you know. And I says, this is what we have to do in order to have our freedom. We have to, some have to give their lives, you know. And I helped to bury them over the side, you know. And then that night, before we went, we were going in and with the other two regiments, the 9th and 21st on Iwo, and something happened. I said, I believe that there's such a thing as God, especially when your life is in danger. And I said, God, I said, save my buddy, but take my life. And it was the next day we were on our way back to Guam. And there we cleaned up the Guam there, because there was Japanese were still running around there. And then we got ready for Japan, the 6th Marine Division was going to be the spearhead of the going into Japan. And because we were able to come up with the A-bomb, if we heard rumors, the Air Force, the B-29s up there, the men in the Air Force, said that you don't have to worry, something big's going to happen. Yeah, like hell it is, you know. We're going to have to go in there and dig them out, just like we always have. Well, there it happened. And by golly, I had enough Guam and Iwo, Jima, you know, points that I was able to be shipped back home. And that's where it was. Well, I mean, I really, it's just that I was in there. I mean, I was there. I never did anything great or anything like that. I was like the other 16 million servicemen and women. And it's because we had so many, and not only because of the servicemen and women, but also because of the people in this country and their attitude of we're going to win, you know, and sacrificing. And the families at home, they received those telegrams stating that their loved one had been killed. They sacrificed too. And I believe that my Commander-in-Chief, Roosevelt, he gave his life for our country too, just as much. And that's why I said on Shangri-La, I'd like to have that introduced again. And I'm going to write to my senators and see if I can have that incorporated with Camp David, you know, so it goes with it, because it was our Commander-in-Chief, Roosevelt, that really started the camp up there in Mount Maryland.
So when you were discharged, did you return to the Rockland area?
Yes, I came back here, and I went to Bath, where I went to school, you know, in the children's home, and I finished high school, and that was in 1946. Then I went to MCI to get credits to go into college at the University of Maine, and I went and I finally graduated in 1943, and I became a teacher for 40 years.
Did you teach locally?
Yes, I taught in the inner city. I taught mostly black students, and I had a good rapport with them. We had to, our special education, and we had to visit the homes, you know, and I had a good rapport with the mothers, and when the children saw that I wasn't a honky, that I was there to help them, I had a lot of cooperation, you know, and we had a good time, because we also played touch football and basketball too together out there.
Can you tell me a little bit about your family?
Well, my people, the Peasleys, come from down east, down Jonesport. My mother's side come from Swans Island, and my uncle, when I was in the children's home at about 12, 13 years old, I'd go down to Stonington, and my Uncle Roy, the one I was named after, he was a commander of post number 102 down in Stonington. And he helped with the widows, you know, from the First World War, and he also helped to get the GI Bill for the Second World War veterans. So I was raised really in the American Legion when they had the big, not small pamphlets, I mean magazines. They had big ones, you know. I sat on the old bed and looked through them, you know. But I went to many of the dances that my Uncle Roy and my Aunt Clara put on for the American Legion down there in Stonington. Yeah.
And my name's Lloyd Richards. I was born up in Sursmont, up on the Bagog Road. in 1921. And when I was 2 years old, I broke my back. And they told me, Father and Mother, I'd never walk again. But I fooled them all. They took, the doctors gave up on me, but my great-great-great-grandfather was married to an Indian chief's wife, and they took me, or started taking me in, and told them to boil potatoes with peelings on them and start rubbing it on my back. And that's what they did. My parents did, my mother. And I went back, I started to walk, and here I am. Army turned me down, but I had to fight to get me back in the service after I went to Poland for my physical. They wasn't going to take me on account of my back. They told me I had it broken, and I told them I didn't. Then they said, you had it hurt it bad, Ben? I said, no, I never did. I wanted to get in the service. They kept turning me down, and the nurse came out and said, they turned you down. I said, I want to go. She said, you want to go? I said, yes. I said, if I'm here, if I don't go, I'm going to keep back for physicals. I want to go now and have it over with. So they took me in. It was back in December 9th, 1942.
Now, did you graduate from high school locally?
No, I did not.
How old were you when you went in?
When I went in, the service, I was 21.
21.
Yeah.
Okay. And where did you attend recruit training?
At Camp Pickett, Virginia, for 11 weeks of basic. Then I went, they sent us out, shipped us out to Africa, Casablanca.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't get any advanced training or anything? You went directly from recruit training right to Casablanca?
That's right.
And, okay, from that point on, what did you do? What did you see?
Well, the first thing, we landed in Casablanca, and it was about 3 days, I guess, and a friend of mine was from Camden. We took training together, and he said to me, he says, let's join the Rangers. And I said, what's your Rangers? He says, I think they're like a cavalry. I said, what? And he said, yes. I said, if it is, I said, that's what I want, for I want to stop walking. So we went up and we joined the Darby's Rangers, and they said to me, he says, can you swim? I said, yes, and I couldn't swim a stroke. And they asked me the different questions. So I went in, and so did he. And we was in, one day we was taking M1 rifles apart. We had to take them apart and put them together until you could do it in the dark. And we were taking them apart, and Lieutenant came up to me and he says, somebody here wants to talk to you for a minute. And I went over, was my friend from Camden, and he says, I'm leaving. I said, what? He says, yes, I went on sick call, responded. So if we went on sick call, we're done. They ship us out. He went on sick call, but I stayed in the Rangers and took my training in Casablanca, and I was 5'2" when I went in. When I came home, I was 5'8½".
Is that right?
I figure that's the Ranger training. I really do. Walking those ropes and climbing them cliffs. I think that's done something to my back. So I went from 5'2" to 5'8½". Well, I trained, and then we trained for invasion of Sicily. And we took the invasion of Sicily, and we went into Gila, Sicily. And I went in first wave. I was in the first wave in Gila, Sicily. And I was on a boat, a landing craft. We brought up on a barge, on a rock or something. And we dropped the ramp, and we started running off. And I didn't know how many got killed at that. And I was all ready to go when it was light enough, so we went over by a rock, whatever it was, and went and hit the beach. And I never knew until I read a book about a year ago. It was 14 Rangers got killed right there when they went off my landing craft. And we went up and hit the beach, went into Gila, Sicily. And we went in there and fighting up through in Gila.
How long were you in Sicily?
Oh, until we took it, I don't know just how long that was, until it was all over. And then we trained for Salerno, and we went into Salerno, And the invasion, I was in the first wave of that one, and went into Salerno. And then they went from Italy. We trained for Anzio, and I went into Anzio, the first wave. And after we took Anzio, beach, they put us out for to go take a town. And when they did, the Germans let us through. And when they did, they cut us off. And that's why we got wiped out on Anzio. And if it wasn't for, we was going up right, walking right up the road. And if it wasn't for the field, when they started, we would go across this field. When they did, the Germans opened up a thing. They had a hole dug in this big farm. It was a big farmhouse. And they had holes dug in. And when I saw the lieutenant, first lieutenant, commanding officer, he went and they was knocking us down. And it was a little ditch, green ditch, a ditch about so wide, full of green slime. And I went down, I dropped into that. And when it goes, then they could fire right over me, but I was down enough. And that must have been at least a half a mile back. So I just started pulling myself down that old green slime ditch until I got down to back to the main road, the road we was on. And I had to get in from that in to one ditch, that ditch to the road, one on the road. And so I could get back into what we call the Mussolini Canal. And I started to move. They'd open up on me. And a big tank, by that time, they got the tanks in. It was a big tank came up, and they said to me, he says, where's that machine gun that's so kind of field? I said, get that tank behind me so I can get down in the ditch and get out back down in that Mussolini Canal. He said, we can't, the ground is too soft. But he said, we'll go up the road and see if we can see him and get him. So we went up the road and back, and he was still there, and they started up again, and I heard a machine gun shift. And when they did, I jumped out of the ditch and into the run on the road and went down in the Mussolini Canal and got down in there, and I see a second lieutenant. Shaking was he shaking. I never seen a man shaking like it in my life. Was he shaking? And then the boys, the Rangers, some of them started coming back, and they jumped up on the bank. And the lieutenant said to me, he said, get them back in here. So I jumped up there, and then I did what we call the screaming mimes, them German mortars. One of them landed right beside of us, and he killed with 3 of us beside me. He killed 2 and wounded 1, and never touched me. And they said they figured it on account it got so close to me, but I don't think that man up there. Yes, I do. He saved me. I should never been back home. Yeah. When he got wiped, so after he got wiped out, we went in what was called the First Special Service Force, part Americans and part Canadians. I went into that outfit until the war was over. We went out through to Germany. Yeah. Yeah.
So you finished the war going into Germany?
Oh yeah, we went right up through, and then I went in the first wave again with the First Special Service Force, but instead of going into France, we took the Isle of Ant and Fort Croft off of the southern coast of France. That's why we went in there. But when we got in there, they'd moved the Germans. The Germans had all been gone. But we went in, they dropped us off 22 miles out, and we went in, paddled in them rubber Navy boats in to take the island, but the Germans was all gone when they got there. Yeah. When they went in from there into France, southern France, and up through, right through France.
So, what did you have any special awards or medals that you won while you were?
No, we were in there. Any Rangers, you done. That's what you volunteered for. Mm-hmm. So we never got nothing, you know. Only thing I got presidential citations and all that stuff, you know. But,
So, after the war, when you were discharged, what did you do then?
I came home and I looked and I looked and I looked for a job and I couldn't find one. They told me when I got discharged, I was a staff sergeant when I come out. They says, you stay in, we'll make it, you'll have a tech sergeant. And he says you could go to Long Island or Alaska. So I came home and I tried to find a job and I couldn't find one. So I went in to sign up to go back in the service. I figured, well, at least I could make more money there than I was out working anyway and get everything furnished. So I went in to sign up, and the guy in his station, when I went in to sign up, I told him I was in sign up, and he says, what outfit was you in? I says, Darby's Rangers. That damned outfit? That's just what he said to me. I says, what? He said, that damned outfit? I said, that's the way you feel about what we just done for you, you know? And I just walked out. When I went hunting, we're building Green Island. I went over and the Bird River was in. I says, need any help? He says, no, but if you're a cooper, he said, I could hire you. I says, a cooper? He said, yes. I said, well, I used to set them up for my father before I went to service. But I said, I never hooked them off. He says, who's your father? I said, George Richards. He says, he's working for us. I said, I know him. So he says, you go over there and tell him I said put you to work. So I went over and started coopering, making lobster barrels. And I made them for about 2 years. And then they said, well, we don't, my father and I would go in at 5 o'clock, but they wouldn't open up till about 8 or after. So I'd go in and make barrels for about 3 hours, and then they'd come in, oh, we don't need you today of making barrels. You go downstairs and go to work. They done that 2 or 3 times for me. And one day I went in, they says, we don't need you today. I'd already made 3 hours. And I said, we don't need you today, go downstairs. And I went into the office and I said, what in hell you think I am? He said, what? I said, I'm not no prick for you. He said, what? I said, making me work here, I'm working 3 hours and you ain't paying me enough for it, making barrels? And you think I'm going to stay here? I said, I'm done. And I went out and went home. And my father, when he come home, he said, you done the right thing. And so my father went to work the next morning. They went in, they says, where's your son? My father said, he quit. He said, we didn't think he thought we'd be back this morning. My father said, he wouldn't have, you done that to me. He said, and I wouldn't be here never. So then I went to work looking around, I couldn't find nothing. I went out on the Charlie Dam scallop dragger out of Boston. Went out on that, and I didn't like that one. I wasn't mad, but my girlfriend didn't. We were going together, and she didn't want me to go out there. And then I went back down, went out on the Araho out of Rockland, O'Hara's. And that one, she didn't want me to go fishing, wanted me to stay in. So when I looked around, I went in 45 and cut fish for about a year and a half, and worked at 80 cents an hour. And I said, God, that ain't enough. So I wanted to get married, so I told my wife, I said, I got to do something else. So I started looking around, and I went lumping, unloading the fishing draggers. And I done that for 21 years. And I get down in at night. If I got down at 9 o'clock at night, my brother-in-law owned the lobster bait business, Colson's lobster bait business. I owned that. If I got down at 9 o'clock at night, I got on that truck and went down east Southwest Harbor to Bernadette Isle, somewhere load of bait, and unloaded that. Came home, I'd be going by a house about 5 o'clock in the morning, and had to be work at 6. And I wouldn't eat no breakfast nor nothing. I'd just keep right on going. That's where I'd done it, for off and on for 20 years.
My name is Malcolm Wiley. I live in Tennants Harbor, Maine, and have always lived here, except for my time in service. I entered service in March of 1943. I went to the induction center at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and after 4 days there at Fort Devens. I was assigned to the Army Air Force and was sent to Miami Beach, Florida for basic training. At that time, the Air Force had taken over the big hotels there, and that was somewhere around 60,000 men at Miami Beach at one time. For someone from Maine, it was very hot there. In the month of February, before I was drafted, I was working in a shipyard in Camden, Maine, and I punched in at the time clock one day in February when it was 32 below. And it was, for me, it was very hot in Florida. And the basic training was mostly close order drills and parades. A close order drill was held on the polo grounds that had been pretty well churned into dust. And twice a week they had a big parade down Collins Avenue, which I understand is the main street in Miami Beach. Also, while there, besides learning close order drill, we were taken for various classifications, tests, and at the end of 6 weeks training, I was sent to Scottsfield, Illinois, to learn to be a radio operator. And by then, that was a very hot place. The weather was very humid, no air conditioning then. We had went to classes 6 hours a day. There was a morning shift, afternoon shift, and a night shift. The night shift was difficult. It was very hot, and learning Morse code with dots and dashes was inclined to put you to sleep. My handbook, which I still have, said falling asleep in class would be treated as treason and dealt with severely.
Oh my.
At the end of my classes in Scottsfield, the test for Morse code was 20 words a minute. And the words weren't readable, they were just groups of letters. Could be usually 5 or 6 letter groups. And from there, I went to aerial gunnery school in Laredo, Texas. That was a 6 weeks course. The first 4 weeks was ground classes and shooting, mostly skeet shooting on the range, and also the machine gun, 50 caliber machine gun that was fired at a moving target. The target was mounted on a Jeep, which was mounted on railroad tracks, and it went in an oval-shaped track. I don't remember now the distance between the nearest side of the track and the back one. And there was shooting at night. They had a light bulb that was on the target, and the target was divided about 1/3 and 2/3. It counted more if you got your shots on the first third of the target. The ammunition was dipped in wet paint, so you would have a color that when it hit the target, it would leave a speck of paint, and they could tell there was probably 6 or 8 different guys shooting at one time, and the paint would indicate who scored.
Right.
On the 5th week, we were moved from Laredo up the Rio Grande River about 90 miles to a place called Eagle Pass. It was across the river from Piedras Negras, Mexico. It was, by then it was even chilly there in Texas. The mud on the ground might be froze a little bit in the morning. And there was no heat or hot water in the barracks. But we would be bused out to an airfield. And that was where I took my first flight in a plane. They were AT-6s, and the pilot was in the front cockpit, and the gunner who was training was in the rear cockpit. And that was a 30 caliber machine gun with ammunition dipped in paint. And they'd fly, there'd be a tow target that would be at various ranges. You had 200 rounds to shoot. Hopefully your pilot would put you in close to the tow target, but sometimes the guns would have a malfunction built in, and you were supposed to be able to diagnose what was wrong with it and being able to fix it. If you return to the base without being able to fire all your rounds, you had to fill out what was called a knucklehead sheet. It started with, "I am a knucklehead because," and you had to give an explanation of why you couldn't shoot all your ammunition. At the end of that week at Eagle Pass, we were returned to Laredo and flew on gunnery missions with a plane it was a 2-engine plane, I think an AT-11, but I'm not sure of that. But it did have a gun turret in it, and you, instead of using a handheld gun, you fired from a gun turret. And usually there were 5 or 6 gunnery students in the plane at one time. And there and at the other base where you shot at a tow target, the tow target plane would drop the sleeve target and someone would count the records of the various paint dots on it. And at the end of that 6 weeks, which was the last gunnery class in Laredo for the year 43, I was given what they called a delay en route, which was I don't remember how many days, but it enabled me to come home and then report to a place in California. It was, my furlough home was in January, so we had a lot of snow here at that time. And think a minute. I'm having a lapse of memory.
You're talking about 19 coming back, and I guess this was January
I
44, right?
could tell a little bit when we graduated from gunnery school at Laredo, I thought, oh boy, there'll be a ceremony and I'll receive my gunner's wings. It was a rainy, muddy day. We lined up and went in a building, and an officer checked our name off and told us to pick our wings out of the box. I don't even have a certificate that I ever graduated from there. It's on my discharge record. And there was another boy from Biddeford, Maine, there at the same time. And for coming, the part of the transportation coming home, you had to pay your own way. And neither one of us had much money. We did go from private to PFC, and we had a kind of a hard time on the train getting home. We were very fortunate. We didn't have very little money to buy anything to eat, and they stopped for a while. The train stopped for a while in Muncie, Indiana, and there were women got on. Hey, excuse me.
It's okay.
They gave us a lot of milk and sandwiches. And we both came home, and I'm missing the name of the base I went to in California.
Was it
Hammer Field at Fresno, California was a base where the various gunners from various schools came there, and then after several weeks there, I was sent with a group to Marchfield, California for overseas training. We got there on a troop train early in the morning. It was just coming daylight. We were met by a sergeant, and as we got off the train to form up in lines, one of the fellas says, "What's that smoke?" "Oh," he says, "that's a B-24 that just crashed. You'll get used to that." And I was assigned to a crew number C9. The pilot was Winton Newcomb from Cambridge, Nebraska. The co-pilot was, his last name was Caldwell from California. The bombardier was Richard Wilson from South Dakota. And the navigator was Warren Coughlin from Texas. The tail gunner was George Galbraith from Nebraska. The right waist gunner was Harold Humber, and he was first radio operator from San Francisco. The left waist gunner was Ernest Cupps. He was an assistant engineer. The first engineer was Raymond Harding from Coffeyville, Kansas. And even though I was 6 feet tall, as an assistant radio operator, I was a ball turret gunner. They always say the ball turret gunners had to be very small men, but I wasn't. I was 6 feet tall. I was the only one on the crew from east of the Mississippi. We trained at Marchfield for 3 months, various types of training for all the crew members. And myself and Raymond Harding, the engineer, caught the mumps, and we was in hospital for something like 20 days. And I missed a lot of the gunnery training. While we were in the hospital, they had a couple of narrow escapes with, one was a navigation error, and the other was a man who wasn't assigned to our crew but was getting extra gunnery training. A machine gun broke free from the mount, and when it fell on the floor on top of him, it fired a couple more rounds. A bullet went through his leg, and it hit among the oxygen supply, and the plane caught on fire. But they managed to get the fire out, and the whole crew got together to go overseas. We went to Hamilton Field at San Francisco, assigned a new plane, and then flew up to Fairfield-Suisun Field, which now is an airport for the city of Sacramento. Well, we really took off under sealed orders. Mm-hmm. But before we actually took off, we checked out the new plane, which had been made in San Diego at Consolidated. While we were...
It was a B-24J?
B-24J was the plane. And while we was still doing some training flights, or shakedown flights they called it, the tail gunner and myself was in the back of the plane, and the rest of the crew was up forward, and the pilot was testing to see what its stalling speed was. Well, when he did that, back in the tail, the plane was vibrating very badly. And tail gunner George called the pilot and told him there was something wrong because the tail was vibrating. And the pilot tried it again, and it vibrated. And George, our tail gunner, was the oldest man on the crew of 28. He called the pilot on the intercom and says, "You do that again, I got the camera hatch open and Wiley and I's leaving." So they took the plane back to the depot in San Francisco, and they found out there was braces that was supposed to be in the tail that had been omitted. So that was repaired there, and then it didn't really fly right. What they call wing heavy, which was, I never fully understood just what they meant. But anyway, we eventually had the wind right and took off for the Hawaiian Islands. And then the pilot could open the sealed orders and said we'd be assigned to the 7th Air Force. And it was about a 11-hour flight to the Hawaiian Islands. And we landed at Hickam Field. And then were transferred to Wheeler Field, which was a few miles from Honolulu. And we flew patrols. They were patrols, but also training flights around the Hawaiian Islands. And then we were transferred to Hickam Field to go through another gunnery school. Yeah, the sign over the door said it was a College of Samurai Extermination. And that was a 4 weeks course, and then we were transferred to a base, Kahuka Air Base, on the northwest side of Oahu. And we did some more training from there, but this was the base where they sent crews to the various squadrons in the 7th Air Force. While we was there, we flew a navigation training mission to the island of Palmyra, which is close to the equator. And it was a Navy base, and we stayed overnight there and returned back to Huka. That was, I think, a 10-hour flight one way. And while we was back at the Kahuka Air Base, we lived in tents there. And then on the island of Saipan was the 7th Air Force 30th Bomb Group. A bomb group consists of 4 squadrons of 12 planes each. And the 819th Squadron had 2 planes shot down at Iwo Jima, and we were sent to replace one of those crews. And to get to the island of Saipan, you flew from Hawaii, refueled at Johnston Island, and then flew to the island of Kwajalein. And we stayed overnight there, and that's where I really realized we were getting into the war zone, because the island had been captured from the Japanese, and there was Japanese writing on stuff. And I don't know if I should say this or not, but we went in a mess hall there, and one of our crew members says, "What's that stink?" And the guy says, "That's all the dead Japs buried under the floor." But we just stayed overnight there, refueled, and went on to Saipan. I think Kwajalein was about 1,000 miles from the island of Johnston Island. And then it was approximately 900 miles from Kwajalein to Saipan. We landed on Saipan late in the afternoon. It was just recently secured. The Marines and Army had gone ashore there early in June, and it had been a major battle. We were landed on, it had been a Japanese air base of Aslido. It was now Isley Field. And we were trucked to the tent area of the 819th Bomb Squadron. It was, by the times we got there, it was dark. The mess tent, everything had been secured for the night. There was still fighting going on, probably a couple of miles north of where we was located. And we were assigned to various tents. I can remember I was told to go to tent 7. And I asked, where will I find it? And well, go up this row of tents, and there'll be a Jap skull hanging on a post in front of it. So I found tent 7 and crawled in, and there was a Mexican under on his bunk under a mosquito net writing a letter by a candle. And I asked him if I was in the right tent. He says, yes, take that bunk. And I says, where's that guy? He said he left on a mission 4 days ago. He won't be back. But next morning we were assigned a tent. 6 enlisted men assigned a tent together, and the 4 officers a separate tent. And the next day we went out to the, I think it was the next day, we had to, it was kind of a breaking in mission, but it was to bomb the Japanese island of Pagan. I think they pronounce it Pagan now. And we went there and dropped 40 100-pound bombs. There's only, out of all those 14 men, there's only 2 of us left. And the other one is Ray Hardin, and he lives in Oklahoma City now. We started flying missions with the brief. They had an outdoor theater, and the briefing would be held there the night before a mission. And in the afternoon, they'd post a notice on the bulletin board for what the bomb loading was. And in our bomb group, we all worked on the plane, and we kept our own guns clean, and we'd, the afternoon before the mission, we'd go out and load the bombs. Sometimes it was 100-pounders and sometimes 500 pounds. And they would, at the briefing, they would announce a target, and also if there was another squadron going with us. Quite often 2 squadrons flew together, and the one we flew with most was 392nd. And
what was your squadron number?
Our squadron number was 819, 30th Bomb Group, 819th Squadron. And flew many missions to Iwo Jima. That was usually the only place where we had interception by Japanese fighter planes. And sometimes they would be very aggressive, and other times they weren't. On our 15th mission, they were, I don't know why, whether they were special suicide planes or whether they were just regular pilots who had maybe been wounded and decided to crash a plane. But one of the 392nd planes flying behind us was hit by a suicide plane, and it was cut right in half. And I was in my ball turret, of course, and I heard the top turret and the nose turret firing, and then I heard the pilot on over the interphone telling them to stop firing. He's going to crash us. This all happened in an instant, but the pilot was thinking if the gunners hit him, knocked him out of control, that he wouldn't be able to evade him. But pilot was very quick and strong, and at the last minute he evaded that plane that was trying to crash on us. I do believe he was hit because I could see him plain when he went by us. And after he went below us, he attempted to regain altitude and he couldn't. And that was probably the time I decided that we were going to be very lucky if we made it. But when we started the missions, 30 missions consisted of a tour of duty, and then a month or so later they added it increased it to 35, and then a while later they increased it to 40. And but I flew bombing missions to the island of Iwo Jima, north about maybe 200 miles north of Iwo Jima was an island called Chichijima, and the Japanese had a Navy base there called Futami-ko, and I flew 8 missions to that I remember the number of 8. And they didn't have any fighter planes there, but they had a lot of anti-aircraft guns, and if there was ships in the harbor, they would have anti-aircraft guns. And we flew there on one mission, and by that time there was several planes in the squadron that had radar bombing equipment. And on this particular mission, as we got close to Chichijima, it was clouded over, and the squadron commander said that the 3 planes with radar equipment could bomb by radar, the rest of the planes bomb by ETA, which meant estimated time of arrival. Bombardier didn't want to drop our bombs that way, so we went below the clouds in quite low over the island, but he didn't get the bombs out, so we went around again still lower, and we were strafing. I was in my ball turret, and I could feel a shell and heard it when it went off, and I opened my hatch, and I was thinking, oh no, not us. The waist gunners were wounded, and control cables were hanging everywhere. But we got out of there, and the pilot gained control, and the 2 engineers started right off connecting the control wires that had been cut. And we, on any mission, the squadron leader's radio operator would send a strike report, like bombs away at such and such a time. I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to continue. It's fine. absolutely fine. Would you like?
But anyway, we survived it. The strike message that the radio operator sent was when last seen. Lieutenant Newcomb's plane was going out of control. But we did make it back. It was a long flight through bad weather. 12 hours and 45 minutes. But that was one of my worst flights. And then besides Iwo Jima and Marcus Island, there was another island called Hahajima, which was near Chichijima. And sometimes there were ships based there. We only flew 2 missions to that. And another island was way off to the northeast of Saipan called Marcus Island. The Japanese had a base there that they used to refuel planes going to Wake Island, which they had captured. Marcus Island had very good, it was a small island, but had very good anti-aircraft gunners. You pretty well knew when you was going to Marcus Island, you would be hit. Just didn't know how hard it would be. Mm-hmm. And I had 3 missions to Marcus Island. And then an island in Caroline Islands, which is south of the Mariana Islands. I had 2 missions to that island, Wolei. And something may be interesting. Sometime after the war, I went to a doctor in the hospital in Camden, and we were talking, and he had been in the Navy at the end of the war, and he had treated people on this island of Wolei for, what's that? Leprosy. And he said he had some success treating those people. So it's kind of a small world, you meet people. Yeah. But anyway, we flew our 40 missions. The 2 waist gunners were the only ones wounded. Tail gunner was saved one day by the flak vest he was wearing. Bombardier was hit by flak in his helmet. But one time we came back from a mission and the crew chief says, "I don't believe you guys went over the target. There's no holes in my plane." And then about 10 o'clock that night, he came in our tent and he says, "I got to apologize." He says, "I found a small hole in the rudder."